I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would you please all rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you all for coming this evening. All are present with Melissa and Enrique remotely. I have received no comments from the public that needed to be in by noon today. So we'll move on to an approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So made.
By Jonathan, second? Second. By Michael. Before we approve that, there's been a request to remove two consent agenda items, C2 and C3, off of consent to be discussed during personnel. So I'm suggesting that we move them under A. We'll have A1 will be certified staffing request, and A2 will be the two items from the consent agenda involving resignations, terminations, and non-renewals, and leaves of absence. Is that correct, Mary?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-2. I can't tell if they're. I need a roll call vote. I'm sorry, we have two people. Mary?
Yes, yay.
Michael? Aye. Stacy?
Aye.
Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Melissa? Aye. Enrique?
Aye.
That motion carries 7-0. On to our consent agenda this evening. These are items that are routine in nature and will be having no separate discussion. Financials, check wire transfer disbursement summary for July 2020 and August 2020. Wire transfer, EFT, and ACH banking activity, monthly wire detail, June 2020, July 2020, and August 2020. Bank reconciliation statements will be posted in October. Building bond investment reports for July 2020 and August 2020. Monthly health, dental, and wire detail, July 2020 and August 2020. Monthly check detail, June 2020, July 2020, August 2020. Monthly ACH detail for July 2020 and August 2020. Approval of school board minutes for the study session on August 3rd. Study session on August 10th. Regular meeting on August 10th. Study session August 24th, and business meeting on August 24th. Under personnel, the candidates for employment as listed. And that's it. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So made.
By Stacy, second.
Second.
By Mary. Mary? Take a vote.
Aye.
Michael? Aye.
Aye.
Stacy? Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Melissa? Aye. Enrique?
Aye.
That motion carries 7-0. On to the resolution for the acceptance of gifts. And this evening, we have a donation from Wells Fargo, which is a matching gift of $119 for Hidden Oaks Middle School, and Wells Fargo payroll for $292, which was for Westwood Sage Academy. Do I have a motion to accept the resolution of gifts?
So made.
So moved.
made. By Melissa, second. Second.
Jonathan.
Second.
Jonathan, Enrique? Okay. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mary?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Stacy? Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Melissa? Aye. Enrique?
Aye.
The motion carries 7-0. Next, we have Laker Pride Recognition and Showcase.
Great, thank you very
Priscilla.
much. Thank you, Chair Schimick, and good evening, board members and viewing public. I'm going to stay seated at this because I am recognizing a whole lot of our community right now, so nobody else will be coming forward. Like all of you, I've experienced many first days of school, probably the first being when I was 3 years old, waiting at the end of the driveway by the big oak tree for my sister Tammy, who was a kindergartner, to get off the bus. And today, my sister's a principal, and it was also her first day of school. Like all of you, I've faced many different emotions during those first days. As a student, a teacher, a parent, my youngest son, Tegan, is a senior, so today was his last first day of K-12 education as a principal and a superintendent. But I have never been so excited for a first day of school, and I have never felt so much gratitude on a first day of school before. Tonight, Prior Lake Savage Area Schools is bursting with Laker pride because of the monumental efforts of staff members and parents to open up the 2020-21 school year. Our staff members have been planning for months. They've worked through construction, staffing changes, a global pandemic, constantly changing Minnesota Department of Education and Minnesota Department of Health guidance, and have put in the long hours up until last night. And the last recording I have, but I'm sure it's not accurate, is there were folks still working at 10 o'clock last night to prepare classrooms and prepare our space so that kids could come and staff could help ensure that they were learning. So thank you does not seem enough today. I'm so proud to be part of the school district and so grateful to serve alongside 1,200 other employees who most likely worked longer hours than ever before under incredible stress and at an unbelievable pace. I honestly worry about how long we can sustain this, but I know that for right now, every one of our employees are true heroes to our students, our families, and our community. I also want to recognize and thank board members for your hard work and dedication. I want to thank you for the learning that you've done about the complexities that we face and the challenges that we have. And I want to thank you for the gratitude and support that you've shown to our staff along the way. Our students, as Abby is here with us tonight, our students have been flexible and understanding, and they truly came to school today ready to learn. And finally, I want to thank and recognize Laker pride to our parents and our families who have managed so much on their end and have helped us by giving us support and grace as we've worked through and planned for the best ways possible to educate all learners to reach their full potential as contributing and productive members of our ever-changing global community. We open today because of this collaborative effort and the work of so many people. And in order for us to be successful this year, we must maintain a spirit of collaboration. We must continue to show our dedication to our commitment to our mission and to all kids. And I think most importantly, we need to stay together, show each other love, kindness, and grace, because we don't know what the future of this year is going to bring. But I can promise you on behalf of the 1,200 employees who work beside me, we will give everything we have to serve our students and to make sure that mission comes to life for them. So tonight, I am so proud of this community. I am so proud of our staff and our students and our parents. And I am so grateful to work alongside all of you as we opened a very interesting year in a really positive way. So thank you.
I think the board concur on everything you said. Thank you to all the staff. It's been amazing. And I'm remiss because I didn't really welcome Abby. She's our new student council rep and student position on the board. So thanks for being here. I can't wait to actually someday see your real face, the whole thing.
Yeah, the half face is a little strange.
But your eyes are smiling. That's cool. Thank you for being here. Okay, we'll move on to personnel. Certified staffing. Jim.
Good evening. Good evening, Board Chair, Board members, Superintendent Stallo. I have several personnel items. Point of clarification, were we going to take those other two first or do these?
We'll do the, just because I numbered it, we'll do the two requests for staffing first.
Okay, sounds good. So we have two requests for staffing. The first one is for certified staff, health services coordinator, and classroom teachers. As we talked about last board meeting, with a couple of resignations, we were able to do some restructuring that I think is advantageous for the district and for staff and students to make a health services coordinator. That is combining two of the LSN positions into one. It makes a full-time employee all year long that is a nurse and can coordinate programming throughout the districts. It's something that we feel is a really good idea and something that actually the LSNs have suggested for several years. So that's one. The other one is classroom teachers in the elementary. One of the things also that we talked about is the hybrid model, and we'll go into that more later, but the hybrid model requires staffing. It's not an easy one-for-one from a classroom to DLA, and when you add in capacity, which we'll talk about tonight too, that complicates it as well. In order to meet capacities within buildings and to have kids sort of even out, one of the things in using COVID dollars that we looked at partially is to add 3 additional elementary teachers. They are strictly for DLA, for distance learning in the elementary. So those are the 2 requests that we bring forward for your consideration.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the certified staffing requests?
So made.
By Stacy, second.
Second.
By Jonathan. Any comments or questions? Jonathan?
Jim, I think you mentioned this, but could you elaborate a little bit? The health services coordinator, it sounds like the idea was sort of bottom-up driven, that came from that.
We've
came
had
from that group
conversations about that
themselves?
having someone at the district level who had the medical expertise to help coordinate programs and to direct staff would be a real advantage. Yes, that's correct.
And the $0 is because we're just repurposing
That's correct.
existing budget
Yeah.
dollars?
Yeah, I think it's on the good side of 0 even, right, if that makes sense. So,
Any other questions? Mary?
Jim, when we laid off earlier this year, is that the nurse? One of them was a layoff and the other one was a resignation?
no, that's a different thing. You have
Okay.
LSNs, licensed school nurses,
Okay.
right? Part of the teacher bargaining unit. And then we do have in what we call the para bargaining unit, 1-to-1 nurses. They're not LSNs, they're RNs, and they're specifically for 1-to-1 student needs. So if we have a particular student that requires a 1-to-1 nurse, that's where we would use that. And we had 1 student age out, so that's why there was one of them was ULA'd or put on leave because we only have 1 student that needed those services. So that's 2 separate nursing positions.
So we had 2 additional resignations that you combined, okay.
In licensed school nurses, correct.
All right, okay, that's what I was trying to
Correct.
clarify. I
Yep.
didn't understand where the positions came from.
That's correct.
And then the other thing is you mentioned the staffing specifically for DLA. Is that a staff position that stays on if we move back to full-time in school, or how does that work?
For this year, we were committing to the year. That's
Oh,
correct.
okay, only for the year?
Yep.
Okay,
I mean, we'd always analyze that once, like we always do in the springtime when we analyze staffing patterns, but our intent would not be if we went back in November to full-time, right? So we're committing to these employees for the entire year.
okay, thank you, that answered my question.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in, Mary?
Aye.
Michael? Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Melissa? Nay. Enrique?
Aye.
That motion carries 6-1. Thanks, Jim. Now we'll move on to the items we moved off the consent agenda.
We have the other 2 positions, the classroom
Yeah,
monitors.
that's under educational support, so I thought I'd
Okay,
keep these.
all right. Sorry.
I guess it doesn't really matter, but we'll keep them here. From the consent agenda, the resignations, terminations, and non-renewals, and the leaves of absence. Mary, you had a question?
Yes, I'm most concerned about the paras and the resignations, non-renewals. We're already short paras, and I just didn't know if you could help me understand or help the board understand what precipitated the larger number of paras that are listed in here.
Yeah.
And is there anything in particular, how we're going to handle the lack of paras?
That's several significant questions. We are concerned as well. But I think the thing, if you look at the dates for a lot of them, once it was pretty clear that we were coming back in some fashion to school, I think we had quite a few paras that I think just made the decision it was time to resign. Almost all of these are resignations, and most of them did it voluntarily. If they had an accommodation, we obviously looked at that, and we're almost always able to accommodate. But when it came to people making a decision, I think it was a personal choice because where they were in their life that they decided that now was the time to resign. So I don't have any specifics or data related to how many people left for what reasons, but the majority of them, they inquired with us. We talked about leaves or accommodations, and again, we accommodated most of those, but some of them just made the decision in the end that it was time to resign. Yeah, and I'll talk more about staffing when we get to that, as far as what we're doing, as far as the challenges related to filling those and what we're doing to try to fill those. So,
And I'll probably have some more questions, just so you
Yep.
know, when we go through the whole distance learning and the hybrid models and
Okay.
issues with IEPs and 504s. But my next question on leaves of absence, if I may. So I know that we had a discussion at the last meeting about unpaid leave and all that. And I was wondering if for the teachers that, or the educators in general that we had that could only do distance learning, we didn't have positions for them, or could, that sort of thing.
Right.
You addressed that at the last meeting, but then when I'm looking at the leaves of absence, I'm seeing unpaid leaves in here, and I'm wondering if you could address if that is related to the same issue we spoke about, or you spoke about, with regards to the commitments for the teachers, for who could do distance learning and who was applying. I believe there's like 58 of them
Right.
at one time.
yeah, and I'm not gonna say 100%, I have to go back and look at my numbers, but for anybody who had a legitimate request for an accommodation, or they qualified under some leave status, we were able to accommodate, to the positive, almost every one of them. And I'd have to go back and see if that's 100%. But there's a few that actually we are still working on now because of the uniqueness of it. But the vast majority, 95+% easily, I feel very comfortable in saying we were able to accommodate. So no, I don't believe those leaves are related to that. I don't think you're going to see a lot of teachers' names on there. There are other staff that might be 2 hours a day or whatever that had other reasons for asking for those leaves.
Okay, so just to clarify, the unpaid leave notices that are here under the leaves of absences are not corresponding that you know of to the ones that were still outstanding from the initial commitment, and they're trying to allocate the teachers for the ones that could not be in school.
Yes, if I'm understanding you, have we worked through all those leaves and been able to accommodate? I would say, again, almost 100%.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
we have.
Thank you, that was my question.
Did anyone else have any questions on either of these areas? Okay, then I'll take a motion to approve the resignations, terminations, and non-renewals, and the leaves of absence.
So made.
By Stacy, second? I'm sorry, Michael? Second by Michael. Mary?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Melissa?
Aye.
Enrique?
Aye.
That motion carries 7-0. Okay, now we'll go on to
Okay.
educational support.
So we have the following additional staffings that we are recommending for approval. The first are the classroom monitors, which we talked about last month. We anticipated we need 12. and use COVID relief funds for that. I'm happy to say, I believe as of today, this afternoon, we're up to 9 that we've hired. I know we need more, right, Dan? I think we're in a good spot there. So we're recommending that for approval. The second is a campus supervisor greeter position. If you've been out to the high school, a new area, there is an area right before you go into the new main office, and there's a spot there for someone to be. And basically what we're doing is discontinuing a computer lab supervisor position, making it another campus supervisor position, cost neutral, and reclassifying it, I guess. So that's the second one.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the educational support staff request?
So made.
By Stacy, second.
Second.
By Jonathan. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, this is Melissa. I do have a quick question.
Okay.
Jim, you mentioned with the other positions that we just voted on, that even if we go back to school in November, that those positions would continue on through the rest of the school year. Is that the case with these classroom monitors?
Not necessarily. They are at-will positions. That's the way the contract reads. And we've talked to them about the short-term nature of this, depending upon what model that we're in. So that's been clarified.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Again, Mary?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
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 Melissa?
Nay.
Enrique?
Aye.
That motion carries 6-1. One more? Approval of job descriptions?
There are 2 job descriptions. They correspond with 2 of the positions that you just approved on the staffing side. One is the health services coordinator, and the other is that classroom monitor at the secondary level. So,
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the 2 job descriptions as described?
So made.
By Mary, second.
Second.
By Jonathan. Comments or questions? Okay, Mary?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
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 Melissa?
Nay.
Enrique?
Aye.
That motion carries 6-1. Thanks, Jim. Okay, we have no unfinished business this evening, so we'll move right into new business with Prior Lake Savage Area Schools Ready to Learn Back to School Report. Dr. Stella.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And as I said earlier, we certainly had a great back-to-school day today. I got a chance to be in almost every building. I didn't make it to our Edgewood or to Bridges or MnCaps today, but every other building, and it was certainly, as I said, more planning probably than we've ever had. And huge returns on that in seeing the joy of staff and students as people came back together. So a few outcomes that we have for you this evening. Again, just speaking a little bit about welcoming everyone back. We also want to make you aware and review the COVID case numbers from the county. Also, because there have been some questions, initially when we had gotten some data and we saw that about 9% of our families were planning to opt into distance learning. We'd communicated at that time that we'd be able to have families make a choice every quarter. And once we got into the actual staffing and complexities of planning for both the hybrid as well as distance learning, along with that percentage of families opting in rising from 9% to 22%, we realized that that just was not sustainable. So we want to share with you a little bit more about the complexities of the hybrid learning plan as well as with the distance learning to make sure that you have a clear understanding of that and why that change had to be made. And then we also want to have a chance to share with you, besides the Scott County COVID case numbers, there are a lot of other metrics that we are looking at on a weekly basis. So in terms of turning the dial or making a change, whether we can sustain the current learning model that we're in or transition to another one, we want to be sure that the board and public has an understanding of the multiple data points that we'll be taking a look at. So those are our outcomes for the evening. So it's been 185 days since our students were in school. And I think that made today, as I've said multiple times now, more sweet than any other year. We've planned intentionally and intently, and it really did pay off today. I don't think I've ever seen so many tears of joy on a first day from teachers, from staff, from administrators, and from a couple school board members as well. As I said in Laker Pride, I also want to be sure that I have a chance to thank our staff. You know, just really some unbelievable efforts up until the last possible second, and I know there's people that are working incredibly hard right now on those plans that, you know, you can only plan for so long, and I think finally today when we got a chance to implement, I know we've learned a lot, and I know we'll continue to learn things every day. That was one of the highlights of talking to staff today, is they felt so confident going into today, and then they said they know that they're going to learn things and they're going to make changes, but the spirit was absolutely positive and amazing across the district. As we, are in the middle of COVID-19, and we had lots of logistics and planning involved in educating our students in very different ways this year during a global pandemic, we also did get a chance to experience the joy of opening so many beautiful learning spaces. I just want to share again my continued gratitude to the Prior Lake Savage Area Schools community for their support. We are nearing the completion of construction projects that they supported with $109 million in that last referendum. And one of those huge celebrations today was opening Hamilton Ridge Elementary. It's a beautiful, beautiful school, great learning spaces, and lots of joy and laughter this morning as we open that space. In addition, we opened with our students many great spaces at Prior Lake High School. The lunch cafeteria space is amazing. The kitchen is absolutely beautiful, and we got a chance to talk to the kitchen managers today, and the work that they did over the weekend to prepare and get ready for today was absolutely fantastic. Although we had ninth graders on last Thursday and Friday, today was the day that we were able to open with our Group A, 9th through 12th graders. As we look at our middle schools, both Twin Oaks Middle School and Hidden Oaks have some beautiful new spaces as well that we got a chance to have students in for the first time last week and certainly into today. And we just want to highlight that and a few pictures also from Hidden Oaks. That cafeteria picture actually was from the new staff workshop. Didn't get in to take any pictures of the children eating today, but a gorgeous space to be sure. And then lastly, we just wanted to show some pictures of Loyola Del Lago at Gradenwood, where we really have some great spaces. When you walk into Loyola Del Lago at Gradenwood, it just feels completely different because that media center has opened up, the brightness of the carpet and the walls and the ceilings, a new kitchen and renovated cafeteria, which again, the kitchen staff today was talking about. They're very interested to see what the acoustics are going to be because the acoustics in that cafeteria were so poor before, so they're anxious to see what difference that will make, but just some really beautiful upgrades. So just wanted to be sure that we highlighted that construction. And then just a little bit additional, I don't think I would call it construction at all, but some additions. It was sure fun this morning, and again, a tribute to our families and their constant support of our students, and beautiful messages across the district today in chalk, which was just really fun to look at, so we wanted to showcase that. As we look at the next slide, again, you're well aware of the Minnesota Safe Learning Model parameters. And as we celebrate, this first day, we're also very much reminded on a daily basis that we're in a global pandemic, and the planning around health and safety has been and will continue to be our priority. Weekly, the COVID-19 District Coordinator, Joe Kabushik, and I attend the Scott County Health meeting with Scott County Health and the other leaders, so we're constantly getting updated with the numbers on that. And as we look at the next slide, we can see that The last 2 weeks, the numbers have dipped right below 20, and 20 is kind of that hybrid, solid hybrid model, and we had been as high as, I think, 25 or 26. Over the last 2 weeks, we've got the data, which ended, so August 22nd, it was a 19.53, and then the data ending August 29th dipped a little bit more to an 18.55. But even with these decreases, the projections for what we will see this coming week, based on the data ending on September 8th, is that we'll be back at the 22 range. So that may or may not be a reality, but I know we have gotten a couple questions that said, well, you were below 20. Does that mean we're going to make a transition? No, it does not. And later in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about those other metrics that we're going to use, as well as, one of the things we'll want to be sure that we do when we make a change is that the data really is more in the middle of that area, or it's over a sustained duration of a period. This kind of flirting around 20 back and forth, if indeed those projections hold and it goes up again, will be something that we would be very cautious of making a change at this point. Then we just wanted to be sure that we talked a little bit about the hybrid model, and as I said, really talk a little bit about what the hybrid and how the hybrid model, or our DIAL model, which is hybrid right now, and the Distance Learning Academy work together. So just a couple guiding principles there as we look at that hybrid learning model, ensuring that our learning environments obviously are safe, and there are lots of requirements that you'll see or be reminded of this evening around that. Goal is to provide as much time in school as possible, given all of the health and safety constraints and where our COVID numbers are, and then having some flexibility and additional time to support the individual learning needs of students. So just a couple things, and these are reminders, I know, but I think it's important that that we're all reminded of the requirements that we're under as we provide a hybrid learning model to our students. So a couple things to be reminded of is that social distancing of 6 feet. As we were in schools, it was very interesting today because there was a lot of teaching around health and safety and procedures. And our creative and amazing staff and teachers did a wonderful job of, as kids are walking down, because everything is marked in the schools. Even at Loyola del Lago, all the markings are in Spanish. But there are markings 6 feet apart. So as students were walking down the hall, the teacher would say, freeze, and they'd stop, and she'd say, are you all on, one of those stickers? And they were. So again, just some different routines than we've ever had to do before. Also, as you know, our school facilities can only have 50%, be at 50% capacity. And then we'll be talking later about those sufficient staffing needs to make sure that we meet all of those requirements. There was a change on the equitable access to technology. I think originally we had K2 with iPads, and at this point we have K1 with iPads because we don't have enough iPads back to distribute to second graders. So K1 iPads, 2.5 Chromebooks, and 6.12 iPads. And again, our technology department, and I could highlight every single department, but the work that has been completed to get the devices and then redeploy devices and break up Chromebook carts and all of those things, absolutely unbelievable work. We were never a one-to-one district. We were a 8th grade to 12th grade one-to-one district, and we have now become, in essence, a one-to-one district because all students are issued a school device. Then just to, again, some reminders just around those health requirements in a hybrid model. And again, the face coverings, I do want to say it was really interesting because I know that was a concern that some of our staff had going into today was the masks, and I know we had some conversations about that. Staff reported no concerns with students. They really, did a great job, and I'm looking back at a couple administrators and seeing the shaking of heads that says, yep, our students really did a nice job with that. And then just making sure that all of those practices are in place. You can see a couple, we are limiting the non-essential visitors at this point. And I know even in one of the sites that, I'd put out and said that I'd like to get around into all sites. Obviously, this first weekend, one of the sites requested that I visit their outdoor learning spaces. And that's absolutely fantastic. So really, we're going to have to do a lot of thinking about those large gatherings as well. I know that as we have some events coming up that we normally celebrate students in person, we're going to have to think about what does that look like. So we'll continue to take a look at all of those things. We also wanted to give you a sense, I think this was a question that came up before, but we wanted to give you a sense of where our students were. And again, as you see the PLSAS dial, that means those students, right now we're in a hybrid model, but those are those families who said, yep, wherever the district is on that 5-prong dial, that's what we, have opted in for right now. And then you see that the Distance Learning Academy, you can also see where the numbers are there. So as we take a look at that, and actually I think I had requested a correction in my newsletter from yesterday, but the newsletter was actually accurate. We didn't have the Loyola del Lago numbers in there, and I'm not sure that we had the Bridges numbers in there. So this is as of today, because we have had students that have continued to move in, but as of today, these are the numbers. And that gets us to about that 22% at overall as a district have opted into either the Elementary Distance Learning Academy or the distance learning that's taking place at the secondary level with all of the learning from home. I'm also going to, we tried to break this down a little bit because like I said, we wanted to be sure that everyone understood the complexities that exist around multiple areas running both a hybrid model and the Distance Learning Academy. So I've asked Jeff and Jim to highlight some of those components right now and just to make sure that you have a really good understanding of how we're running and operating all this and the differences between elementary and secondary, because they both have complexities, and in some cases, they're a little different complexities. So Jim and Jeff, thank you very much.
All right, thanks. I'll start first with talking about staffing a little bit, and I think one of the things that you'll hear from us over and over again, and probably what I'd say is the foot stomp statement here, is that when it comes to looking at particularly the hybrid model, the limiting factors are building capacity and the right mix of staffing, right? So those are the two things as we walk through this that I think you'll hear Jeff and I both talk about, that building capacity and then the right mix of staffing. So related to staffing, just to give you, sort of set the table for this as to where we're at. Out of those 1,200-ish employees that we have, we had 109 requests for leaves or for accommodations for COVID reasons, basically. So outside of a lot of the normal leave requests that we would get, we had 109. 83 of those were approved. We accommodated almost everyone, as we talked about before. We still have 31 open positions. I know this says 70. We have 31 that are open and posted. The rest of them, I'll give you an example. Kelly has like 22 kids company that she's still waiting for the numbers to stabilize because of fee-based things as to whether she fills them with a permanent hire or not. So I know that seems like a lot, and it is, and if we were hiring for everybody, we would have close to 70, but right now we have 31 that are open and posted, yes.
Jim, can I just add something to that? Because I heard we were in the high school kitchen earlier or at the end of the day today, and Emily Malone shared something similar. Yep. She still has some open positions, but at this time does not want to hire for those because she just said, if we do move in the future or near future to distance learning, she would be then concerned about if she would need to lay off any staff or do anything like that. So while those positions are open at this point, she's unwilling because of the constant change and uncertainty to fill those vacancies right now.
That's correct. So, and those are the two biggest out of that 40 whatever, the majority are Child Nutrition Services and Kids Company for that very reason. So thank you for that. And then the rest of them are sitting there. We haven't acted on them yet, but it gives you an idea of where we're at. So out of that still runs around that 5-6% of staffing. So not bad, but one of the things that, you know, we talk about all the time is like with the classroom monitors, we need 12, we have 9. We have to make it work with what we have right now. It doesn't take too many more staff to go out where we may not be able to meet that by internal staffing and shifting people around and having people fill in as much as possible. How long you can do that, we'll see. But we have been hiring. We hired, I think, like I said, I think we hired 8 people last Friday. We hired a few more today, so we are filling some of those in as we go. And so, but that gives you an idea of where we're at related to staffing. Some of the challenges that we have there is that, as I mentioned before, when you have a distance learning and particularly hybrid model, you are spreading your staffing out because of the students that you spread out. And so what that does is it doesn't give you necessarily that ability to take one classroom teacher and make them a distance learning teacher and all the numbers are gonna work. With several buildings, multiple grade levels, that just doesn't happen. And I think the easiest example I could give is if you had, for numbers' sake, an average of 30 kids in a 5th grade classroom and you had 4 sections in the building, and we're at 20%, let's say, 20% are district learning kids. Well, now you have 24 kids average in 4 sections and 24 in a distance learning section. So if you want to keep it at 4 teachers and get rid of 1 section, you now make sections of 32 in the building, right? And 24 in a distant learning section. Well, then, even if you said 32 is okay, then capacity comes into play, where in most of our buildings, the capacity in that classroom, including the adults, is 14 to 16 in an elementary building. So you can see how those two then intertwine when it comes to staffing and building capacity. So I hope that made sense, but that's my short, simple example. So spreading out staff is a challenge. And of course, we're accommodating for people who can work from home, but what that means is at the secondary level, you need someone in their classroom while they're teaching from home because the kids are there. That's different than a distance learning model where the kids are at home. And right now, I think the fact of the level of concern for teachers, for administrators, for whoever, paras, for just generally in society, it's a little harder to pull people in to want to do this. I think everybody, we're talking about that as districts around the metro and the state, that it's harder and harder to recruit for a lot of those positions that you need for child nutrition, for paras, that sort of thing. So what we've done is we've really tried to make a campaign to recruit. We put it on the website, newsletter, asked our employees to reach out to anybody they might know. Yeah, we've hired those 9 out of 12 classroom monitors, and we also hired the 3 elementary DLA teachers. So there are some things that we're doing. I think some of them have helped, and they continue to help. I hope that's enough that we can get some more folks in here and maintain this for a while. So is that any questions related to staffing? I just want to sort of set the stage there related to that and start to mix those two together of capacity and staffing.
Any questions from the board on staffing?
So I just wanted to clarify, so you would consider us fully staffed, like, minus a few positions, I mean, for the most part?
I would consider us functionally staffed.
Functionally, okay. Okay,
I wouldn't know, I don't know what fully staffed looks like right now.
Well, and I think part of what's really tricky, and again, sorry to interrupt, Jim, but I saw an example of this today. At one of our middle schools, we knew that there were, X number of teachers who had the accommodation to work from home. Everything was planned, everything was set, those classes were covered, everything was fine. Well, then, if you get a couple more staff, which is what happened, which either are in quarantine or ill themselves, then can those staff be teaching from home? Well, yes, if they're not sick, but then what if somebody else gets sick in their family or they get sick? And the scramble around getting subs is enough of a challenge. But now when you look at the classroom monitors, when we don't even have those filled yet, let alone have a sub pool for that, becomes really challenging. So right now, to get things going, we're able to use all other staff, but we're pulling them from their responsibilities. And again, that's not a sustainable model. It's an opportunity, and it was a great way for us to be able to start, but getting those other positions hired and the classroom monitors will be huge, and maybe some kind of a pool around that would be great as well.
Good evening. I'll kind of take over a little bit here, and it's a great segue because as Jim was talking about all the planning and all the logistics of what's happening in school with the monitors and the instruction, you know, to Dr. Stallo's point, life is happening. We are having staff that are you know, ill for a variety of reasons, absence for a variety of reasons. So we have to adjust with that. And so that's something that happens every day by the hour. I know that our staff is nervous about that. And so functionally, yeah, I think that's a good way to do that. I might take that in future. You know, we're functionally staffed. But that does have an impact on how we're staffing with our Distance Learning Academy and hybrid learning. Everything that you see here on this slide is interrelated. There isn't one thing before the other. There's a lot of plans, there's a lot of things on paper, but making it all happen does require interface with staff and teachers and students, whether they're at home, whether they're at school, to all the things that you heard on the previous slides of ensuring that we have a safe environment at school. Appropriately distanced, you have you know, drop-off procedures, all of those different things. So I'll talk a little bit about Distance Learning Academy. As you saw the numbers in the previous slide, we are at about 22% district-wide for Distance Learning Academy. Our elementary DLA is operating as a bit of a separate school. We have the parents who've requested that. We've recruited staff internally. We've had staff express an interest, and we have staff that for kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. We have specialists. We have special education teachers. They are the homeroom and DLA teacher for the elementary students. As an offshoot of that, we also have approximately 80 students that's included in the numbers, so even your newsletter and the correction you sent was both accurate. We have teachers at Lola del Lago having their Distance Learning Academy as well. At the secondary, that's inclusive of students that are on distance learning. They are doing a 6-period day schedule with the students that are in hybrid. So students that are there in person, students that are there distance, they're having access to the same class, same teachers, they're logging in through Schoology, they're participating in synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities. I know one of the things that I'm sure we'll have a report is how we started this year with 6th and 9th graders. Number one, I think the transition and foundation of building relationships, what I'm hearing is people saying this is a great way, even outside of COVID, to start an experience for kids. Having freshmen, having 6th graders coming into the building, seeing what's going on, move around, find their classes, feeling a bit more confident, having those connections was really, really important. So it's a bit of a softer start, and we have the 7th and 8th graders, 10th through 12th graders that are a bit prepared or getting ready to start today and tomorrow, and then also Wednesday, a formal kickoff with DLA students at the secondary level. And so it has been a ramp up. Much of what we've been doing the last couple days, in addition to the orientation, is all the safety protocols. All of the different things around how is school now during the COVID time. I'm sure when you were out today in the buildings and Dr. Stallo doing that, you could see that it was pretty quiet, tremendously quiet. I think, you know, it's hard to understand, or I think put ourselves in the feet of kids. They haven't been in our school since last March. And so we have to recognize how we bring kids in, how we connect with them, the intentionality around that, and it's going to be something we're going to have to continue to focus on as we go through the year, whether they're in distance learning, hybrid learning, or somewhere in between, okay? For hybrid learning, we have the teaching support staff. The logistics of hybrid learning, and I know Dr. Stallo and Jim, you talked a lot about this, particularly schedules was important, class section, staff changes, the lunch program or the breakfast program. Again, the guidance that we've been working on, and you've heard it, we've been planning for months, but we've not been planning a static situation. Guidance from the Department of Education and the Department of Health has had updates. Obviously, as the country is grappling with how to respond to COVID-19 and what we're learning, that is impacting the guidance to which we can open, to which how many people we can allow into our buildings, and what are those procedures and practices we have to put in place for learning. And so as those are not easy changes. Serving breakfast and lunch every day with a curbside pickup and serving lunch during the school day for kids in hybrid is not just okay, let's make a few more bag lunches for people. That requires much more planning, experience, and also some thought process to making sure that we can cover both sides. Same thing with Tier 1 childcare. Ensuring that we have the appropriate staff and models in place in order to do that. And some of those things have continued to change, and that's been a challenge. And I know some parents are wondering, well, you know, you've had all this time to plan, but yet there seems to be some ambiguity. Yes, there has been ambiguity because we've had to respond in order to appropriately open through a distance learning and ensure a safe school environment for our kids. And I want to go back to that second guiding principle on the dial. The most possible time, or getting kids in school as much as possible. And that has proven to be a considerable guiding principle to be able to follow and be able to continue to hold true through this process.
Jeff, can I
Yeah,
ask you
go
just to
ahead,
back
please.
up a little bit, just because I think that one of my biggest surprises was the complexity of planning for an AB. Because quite honestly, and Jeff knows that I said this, it's like, well, can't we just split the alphabet? And that was a big no. And Jeff, can you just explain, and I know one teacher, when I said that, they said if we'd split the alphabet, they'd have 6 kids there on one day and 24 kids there on the other day. So that was not what worked for us. So Jeff, would you just share just a little bit so that people and the board understands all that was involved in determining an A-B schedule, both in classes and scheduling and buses and...
But you're setting it up quite nicely. Because I think what seems in concept easy or doable, when you start looking at neighborhoods, you start looking at families, you start looking at, okay, who has kids in elementary, who has kids in a special program, middle school, high school. We want to keep families together. So that becomes one of the criterion that we look at in order to schedule. You start looking at the alphabet in simple terms, it doesn't equal out evenly. And so then you start looking at how do we split students, keeping families whole. And I will say, to the credit of Infinite Campus, our student information system, a lot of districts in Minnesota, you know, with their SIS, work with Infinite Campus. They were working on this for the last several months because they had heard, you know, hybrid, splitting kids, and they started working through a program. So their software really helped us to do that. And it's not as easy, and it's not as easy as saying, well, let's just flip a switch, push a button, and magically the kids will land where they're supposed to be, and all will be well. It just doesn't work from that standpoint. So that's part of it. The other part of it, too, is not all of our buildings are equal. They're not equal in square footage. And so when we think about, we create a capacity calculator that principals had to go through, gauging their resource areas, their cafeterias, their classroom spaces, and determining how many students can be in that building. And when you start thinking about students and staff, and when you start thinking about students with special needs and having them in an inclusive setting and the adult support that they need, you're not just talking about student capacity, you're talking about adults, kids, people capacity in the building. That's a key part of it. The other part, too, is with transportation, looking at the bus capacity, as well as where neighborhoods and how many students are in each neighborhood. And then the logistics of how do you load the bus, how do you exit the bus. There were a lot of moving parts, considerable amount of moving parts. and then balancing what parents are requesting. Hybrid, distance. Oh, I want hybrid. Oh, I've thought more about this. I think I want this. And so we have a dynamic again, and we're asking parents to choose or give the district perspective of what do you want your kid to do to start the school year. That's a tough challenge, especially when they've not done distance learning before. And I know we've caught some parents off by surprise thinking, well, we thought it would be this. Well, and we've been working with parents on that. And those same challenges are also the same challenges when we have parents that are calling saying, well, it's just my student and I want them back in the classroom in a hybrid setting. When we've gone through and looked at all of the capacity, in some of our buildings, we don't have that additional capacity to fit one more student. And so as we go through these next couple of weeks, it's a constant, our principals are they know the parents who've reached out to them. It's much easier to go DLA at the secondary level than it is to come into the building. The elementary level, it is a bit more complex to go DLA because we have really separate teachers teaching DLA. So what will happen is class sizes switching to DLA will increase. And as they increase, then we have a question about staffing. How do we staff that, or do we have class sizes in our DLA go higher than what we're seeing in our hybrid class sizes, which is different. We know it's different. The classroom management looks different in a hybrid setting in addition versus a DLA setting. So, is that?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So this is a bit of a graphic Christy put together. I think it's a really much more succinct way of explaining what I just talked about. Right? Okay. And I talked a little bit about this as well. These are all interrelated. There's a lot of things from the staffing to students. It is a very complex puzzle, looking at capacity, balancing needs, looking at staffing, and then also too, responding to staff absences, student absences, and how do we cover and how do we fill those positions. It's going to continue to be something that is going to challenge us in the days ahead. So let's talk a little bit about, you heard a little bit about this, and Dr. Salo, I'll ask you to jump in if I miss something, but, you referenced it earlier, and that was, parents requesting, originally the district had said, hey, can every quarter we make a decision around hybrid or DLA? And I think in concept, we'd love to be able to do that. We'd love to be able to allow families that flexibility to kind of gauge what's best for their child, what's working for their child, realizing that balance of maybe DLA wasn't what they were anticipating or wasn't what they felt their kid wanted or needed, and wanted that ability to go back into a hybrid setting, and vice versa. Some parents saying, you know what, my son or daughter would like a distance learning experience. And the interconnectedness of this will have ripple effects. As we think about 660 students in elementary distance learning academy relative to the other students, we are committing to asking parents to commit for quarter 2 and beyond. Engaging how many parents want their students to come back into a hybrid, we have to gauge what capacity we have remaining, and we're right up against the line right now, versus how many parents want to opt their kids into distance learning. So there's that. So we have to look at capacity. We also have to look at transportation. So students that we haven't been transporting, we have to now make sure it works for on the bus, because they're not all living in the same neighborhood. They're not all on the same bus routes. The other component we have to look at is when you have students that are shifting, they may not come all from one school or from one class. And so by doing that, if we have a big spike in families that want to go distance learning academy, without additional staffing, we would have to reshuffle hybrid, the teachers that are the classroom teachers that are teaching hybrid, and shift them into becoming distance learning teachers. What that means is the homeroom classes will need to be dispersed into other teachers' classes. So there's gonna be a transition. That's a possible ripple that could happen depending on what parents are requesting and the numbers of students who may want to shift back and forth. Likewise, if we have parents that say, you know, we all want to be hybrid. We all want to be back in school. 2 days a week sounds great. If the state does not ease the capacity requirements of 50%, or that 6-foot distancing, if they don't say, you know what, our data is telling us with COVID cases, we can allow 70% capacity or 80% capacity, we're gonna have some significant challenges being able to allow kids back into buildings if we don't have more students going out, or unless the state would allow more people access or to come into buildings. It's the equivalent of rescheduling every quarter. Same thing with the secondary schedule. It would be the equivalent of redoing the secondary schedule every quarter, shifting kids, shifting teachers. And I guess that could happen, but when we're looking for a time of stability, and we're looking for teachers and students making meaningful connections, that is potentially going to have an impact. Did I miss anything?
No, and you know, I want the board and I want our parents to know that we recognize the concerns that they've shared with us and recognize their feeling even to say, well, you said this and now you're saying this. And yep, I have learned, you know, we said one thing based on an anticipated 9 or 10% of our students where we thought we could manage that change every quarter. We're in a very different position right now. I have absolutely learned that from this day going forward, when I make decisions during a global pandemic, I will say this is the decision at this time because there just is not certainty. To Jeff's point, I understand the parents' need for flexibility. I understand their fears about, you know, what's going to happen in January. I understand all of that. And there may be places, as Jeff pointed out, at the secondary level, especially folks who would want to go from a hybrid to distance learning, that's not as difficult of a transition as it will be if all of the distance learning or many of the distance learning want to come back in person if we have the same requirements that we currently have around capacity. So we recognize the unpopular change that was made and how some parents are frustrated by that. And we just wanted to be sure that you understood the impact of potentially, you know, if we overpromise and then underdeliver, of making that change at the quarter as we originally said.
Here's what we can commit to do, or what we're committed to doing, is our principals know the families that are looking either way. You know, we encourage parents to reach out. They have. There's been a lot of conversations our principals are having with families. We're going to be monitoring this weekly as far as families who leave the district or unenroll, going through those lists and saying, hey, we have room, we have capacity. The beginning of the school year, and you'll hear this from Julie when we're talking about enrollment, the beginning of the school year, we always have students who have enrolled in other districts, don't necessarily always unenroll, and we find out they unenroll when the other school district requests their cumulative file and cumulative file information. And so these next couple weeks, we may have some transition of students in and out of the district, and that will allow us some opportunities to circle back with those families and say, you know what, we do have space now. It just may take a little bit of time in order to work through that process.
I think I'm back on. Thank you. So again, just wanted to share with you the data points. And again, this was from the week prior to what we heard on Friday, because that Friday number was down to an 18. But we just wanted to set that up as an example. And Jeff, can you help continue to forward? Yep. Thank you. Appreciate that. The next, we just wanted to be sure that we also had a chance to talk to you about the multiple data points as we look at, can we, number one, sustain a learning model, and then number two, some of that other data that we look at as transition points. Again, that county number is a really important number for us, and certainly one that is a starting point for what districts are going to do and need to do with their learning model. But as you just heard, there's a lot of other complexities around this, primarily with staff, that we need to take a look at. So here are, thanks Jeff for that, here are some of the things that we're looking at as we consider what those future transitions may be that we need to make. Obviously looking at those safety requirements and if anything changes, or guidance around the building capacity, what our enrollment looks like, the classroom capacity, number of sections, our teaching staff and support staff, again, any others who might be in quarantine or might, get sick or be gone for whatever reason. And then really looking at transportation. That is an area that if we have bus drivers who are out, that stops us in a lot of ways, or we would have to look at doing things very differently. And again, that's not something you can do, in a short amount of time. And then that change that Jeff talked about, that we'll talk about a little bit, about the school meals, and again, ensuring that we've got the supports for that. So as we look at all of those different things, again, as I've said, on Friday mornings, and actually we're changing that to Thursday afternoons now, we'll meet with, Joe and I will meet with the Scott County Health, and then on Friday mornings, our Incident Command Response Team meets. And at that time, these are some of the data points that we look at. The first report that Joe and I give is a briefing on the county data, on the incidents, on any other information that they've shared with us. Joe and I will also be connected to our regional support team if there is anything that we need to contact them on or get guidance from them on. And then we get a report from Human Resources, and we'll continue to take a look at that as we look at our staff, our accommodations, our leaves, illnesses, exposure rates, some of those things. We'll start looking at sharing student absenteeism as well. Principals, we've got 3 principals, one from each level that sit on that team. They'll give us a report and a briefing in terms of what's happening in their building. Are there some other procedures or protocols that we need to take a look at and change as we move forward? Transportation, Jim and Maureen are at the table. They'll constantly provide us data around what we should be considering with transportation. Emily and Kelly are also around the table, so helping us think about staffing needs in terms of child nutritious services and kids company. As we look at that list, it's really interesting because as people have talked to me about our readiness and our preparedness, and the logistics that you are hearing this evening that we've worked on, a lot of this is not necessarily just about the teaching and instruction. It's really all of those other very important services that we provide to our students and our families every day, the transportation, the kids company before and after school, as well as now hybrid day support, learning support for our students, meals, obviously, transportation, some of those other things. So those are some of those, some of the data that we're looking at as we really continue to look at, okay, can we sustain, based on all of this data, can we sustain the model we're in? Are there indications, are there things that we need to be looking at or watching for as we consider making a change? So just wanted you to be aware of all of that as well. And with that, I'm going to ask Joe Kubushik to join us. Joe has done an absolutely phenomenal job as our district COVID coordinator. He is in a lot of different meetings and has done a lot of learning, and communication has been absolutely excellent. So with that, I'll let Joe take it from here to talk about some updated changes with health and safety.
All right, thank you. Board Chair Shimmick, Dr. Stallo, board members, thank you. What you see in front of you is the updated Minnesota decision tree. So one of the things that's been shared a couple times tonight has been the focus on education for the various groups of staff, students, and parents. On August 31st, the first day staff returned, we actually began the day by every single building running staff through a training. Later that afternoon, the Department of Health released this updated document, which changed some of the training that our staff had gone through just earlier in the day. And so that's just a great example of how this is continuing to change, and we are providing education for our various groups, but I anticipate that education continuing as we move through the school year. taking this document right here, we've provided all of our parents with a training. It was sent home in a district communication and can also be found on our district website. And what we do with that is we really walk parents through this decision tree. This is, what do you do if your child wakes up in the morning and has a symptom? What happens if your child develops a symptom while they're at school? What happens if your child has come into contact with a confirmed positive case? And that's what this decision tree really does, is walk parents through that. It can be confusing to read. For those of us that look at it all the time, it's a little bit easier to understand, but that's the reason why we did that training, for parents to be able to see that. And so we'll continue to provide training as needed and as the Department of Health continues to update their pieces. Students were the third part of that education, so all of our Hybrid A students had an opportunity to watch a training in their buildings today. Our Hybrid B students will watch those trainings tomorrow. So, thank you.
And then I think along with Joe just shared, I just wanted to highlight a couple of those other programs, just again, so you get a sense of the changing guidance and how that then impacts some of the planning that we're doing. What Kelly Vossen and her team have been planning for with the emergency child care was last spring, only one of the parents needed to be a critical care worker. And that's how we then communicated as she started to share information with parents this spring. She sent out, I think the first email, July 30th, to parents about that as they started to register. Well, then on August 18th, some of that guidance changed that said both parents needed to be, or we were not required to provide free child care to critical workers of Tier 1 employees unless both parents were Tier 1 employees. We decided that we had already communicated to our families, and families had already been in the midst of planning. So we maintained our one parent on that. Our numbers right now are such that we're able to do that. I think that is one of the things moving forward. We also have some funding, Julie will talk about that later, that we know that we have through December. But that might be an area that we also have to make a change on down the road, and we'll certainly continue to communicate with board members and families about that. So Kids Company has a very different scheduling as well. So they're used to before and after school childcare and parents having some options around that. But now in addition to that, they also have, as we said before, on those home hybrid days, they have students that they're both supporting the distance learning or the home hybrid learning of those students, as well as providing care. So just wanted to highlight, again, just the amazing amount of work that team has had to do, along with building principals, really to schedule into every building 3 or 4 classrooms, depending on how much space, and again, abiding by that capacity, and then who they were able to care for. And in the same way, the next slide just speaks to, again, talk about changing guidance. So on August 31st, the USDA gave a press release that talked about extending the waiver that was in place last spring for free meals. MDE did not provide guidance around that until Friday, September 4th. So again, our Child Nutritious Services team has done an incredible job of saying, yep, we're going to take a look and we're going to embrace that waiver and that opportunity to support our families, and now are figuring out the plans about when those deliveries will be, or those, I'm sorry, it's not deliveries, curbside, not deliveries, I apologize. At this time, there are no deliveries. The curbside pickup is for that. So again, just wanted to highlight the unbelievable work of our staff around, you think you have something in place and planned, and then something changes, which alters plans and changes things, which we're happy to do and will continue to do to abide by the guidance. But I just want to be sure that board members understand that, and that our community and parents understand that. And again, I've never in my life had a time where teamwork and being partners with people is going to be more important, as we all work really hard to educate kids in the best way possible during a global pandemic, with lots of uncertainty and change. That is the one constant that we have. So with that, if there are any other questions, we're happy to take those. Otherwise, thanks for, again, being learners in this so that you can help and continue to lead our district to a successful year.
Does anyone have questions? Mary?
Terry or Jeff, can you update us on the actual cases that we've had in the school district so far?
In cases of positive,
Yeah.
positive or
Or
exposure?
contacts or exposure?
Well, currently I'll have Mr. Kubushek talk about that process, but we have had some positive cases reported, and we've been following that decision tree, you know, to the T and taking guidance from the Department of Health. So unless there's anything you want to add to that, but.
I don't think so. I would say the majority of the cases that we've had so far have been exposures by staff. Most of that has been linked to things outside of work.
Okay. So we haven't had any positive tests of actual students or staff yet at any of the schools? Just clarifying.
Students, no.
Okay.
We've had a couple staff, yes.
Okay, okay. All right.
I'm
Is-
sorry, he was cutting out there. What was that again? Last
Students,
thing he said?
students, no. A couple staff, yes.
But no students.
Correct.
and-
Thank you.
And just to follow on with that, how the staff, I know that we have a staffing issue already. How is that process working now that we've had this happen and,
Very rapidly, because it's the first day of you know, and I think that's the dynamic nature of this.
okay,
You know, it's looking at who are the staff that are currently in the building to be able to cover that class. Because as those staff members come up where they're unable to come to work, or they're in quarantine, or they're caring for a family member, it then, you know, principals are working with their staff, how do we cover this class, whether it be hour to hour on a 6-period day, or for that homeroom? And so principals, assistant principals, deans, guidance counselors, other staff members, you know, those are, you know, it's looking at the staff we currently have available. And I think, Dr. Stallo, to your point, that's a bit of the tenuous nature of this. It's one thing if we're doing this for a short period of time, but if individuals are quarantined, that's more than a one-day occurrence. And so it is something that is going to require us to pay attention to it and monitor, you know, like we have right now. As soon as we have any phone calls or communications from our staff around this, that information is documented immediately, and then we go into how do we problem solve so that we can provide that supervision, that instructional component for kids.
It was really interesting. I was talking to one of the middle school teachers after school today and asked about the masks and, you know, just said today was a big day about the students hearing about the safety procedures and all of that. And the staff member looked at me, and I'm just looking at my phone because I wrote it down because I wanted to quote what he said. And as he was talking to his students about the masks, about social distancing, he just said, doing all these things keeps us here. And I think that is, you know, our goal is for us to be able to be in a hybrid model where staff and students can be in person as long as we possibly can. And to what you're hearing this evening, I believe our challenges, especially where the Scott County data is right now, is not necessarily going to be Scott County numbers, but it's going to be, can we sustain the staffing model for us to maintain a hybrid model? We know of other districts that had to move from a hybrid model to a distance learning model, and that wasn't because, in most cases, of numbers. So that really is something that we're working on and trying to get people hired so that we've got a pool of folks that can support us when people can't be in school. Thanks.
Questions, Michael?
I'll wait till questions are done, but I just wanted to reflect